Okay, so good morning, everyone. So I don't know, to start, maybe if you have any question from what we have seen yesterday, before I start with this third lecture about three neutrino phenomenology. So yesterday we saw, I was discussing the formalism for neutrino oscillations in vacuum and also in matter, okay, trying to see the main characteristics that we will put in practice today, already applying it to experiments, to the different sectors. So do you have any comment or question? So if not, remember that this afternoon we'll have, after Christoph, the tutorial with Christoph, you will have the office hours, so you can come also to our office to ask some questions. Okay, so then the topic for this third lecture is three neutrino phenomenology. And then let me start with a summary of the properties of the probabilities that I think yesterday I just shifted, I jumped over it. So yesterday we derived the formula for the oscillation probability, the probability to starting in an experiment with a neutrino with a given flavor alpha, and then the probability that at the detector you will measure a neutrino with a different flavor beta. Okay, so a consequence of the unitarity of the mixing matrix, okay, the mixing matrix relating the two bases of eigenstates, then the consequence of that is that the probability is conserved. So if you sum up all the different probabilities, so if you have a beam with electron neutrinos, and then you consider the probability that these neutrinos remain as nu E, or it transforms to nu mu, or it transforms to nu tau. So the sum of these three probabilities by the unitarity of the mixing matrix should be 1, conservation of probability. This seems very obvious, but there will be some scenarios when we will discuss physics beyond the standard model, where the mixing matrix will not be unitary, and then some part of the neutrinos, of the original neutrinos, will transform in something else, that we will call sterile neutrinos or neutron-heavy leptons, that could not be measured at experiments. So then, if I start from a beam with an electron neutrinos, and at the experiment, I measured what I could measure, that are the active neutrinos, nu E, nu mu, nu tau, the sum of the probabilities will not be 1. But okay, so far, we are considering the standard three neutrino scenario. In that case, the probability is conserved. So the sum over all the probabilities will be 1. Okay, if you remember, when you derived first on Monday afternoon with Christoph, and yesterday we saw it as well, when you derived the neutrino oscillation probability, you saw that the terms, there is the oscillation term that goes with delta m squared. Because once you put all together the three pieces of the projection from the flavor eigenstate to mass, the propagation in vacuum or in matter, and then you project again over the flavor eigenbasis in order to detect, the phase you add for the evolution of mass eigenstates, you have a phase that goes with the mass of the neutrino. But once you do the calculation of the probabilities, then the term that survives depends on the difference of the masses. So on delta m square Ig being mi square minus mj square. So with neutrino oscillation experiments, we will not be able to measure the absolute scale of neutrino masses, because neutrino oscillation probabilities are not sensitive to the mass, okay, to the scale of mass, but only to the difference of the masses. Okay, this is why today I will discuss about the results we have measured, the difference between M1, M2, and M3, but I will not be able to infer from neutrino oscillation experiments which is the value of the lightest mass. To infer this mass, we will see that we need to rely on cosmological measurements or other kinematical measurements at experiments. So from oscillations, we are not going to get any information on mass, only delta m squared. What else? The oscillation formula, we have derived the values of the mixing matrix. We derived it for the case of neutrinos, but we can do the same calculation we did. It's valid for antineutrinos, just doing the change between the mixing matrix and its conjugate. So the formula is the same, but if I need to calculate the survival probability, the oscillation probability for an antineutrino channel, then I need to do the complex conjugate of the mixing matrix. Okay, what else? So if you remember, we were discussing the number of parameters of this mixing matrix. We have several mixing angles, several phases. So the presence of these phases in the mixing may induce CP violation. Okay, CP violation means that if I measure neutrino oscillations in a given channel, for instance, nu alpha to nu beta, the symmetric process of that one, if I apply CP symmetry, will be under CP symmetry, this will transform to anti-nu alpha to anti-nu beta. Okay? So if there are some phases involved in the calculation of the probability, if I have the survival probability for the neutrino channel, then I use the same result to do the anti-neutrino channel. And in that case, if there are some phases, when I do the complex conjugate of the mixing matrix, these phases will result in a different result for the neutrino and the anti-neutrino channel. So sometimes I will say it to what yesterday we were calling the phases in the mixing matrix that could be Dirac or Majorana. We will refer to them as CP violation phases, because the presence of these phases induces CP violation in neutrino oscillations. Okay, I will get back to this later on. Okay, so we saw that there are two types of phases. We have the Dirac CP phases, but in the case that neutrinos are Majorana particles, if you remember, we don't have the freedom to reabsorb some of the phases in the mixing matrix. I cannot reabsorb it in the redefinition of the fields. In that case, I will have some extra phases in my mixing matrix. The good thing is that these phases, these extra phases I will get in the case of Majorana neutrinos, do not have any impact on the neutrino oscillations, okay? Because at the end, I can parameterize it, like they will be just, I will add a diagonal over the mixing matrix that I could just rephase from oscillations. So then when I will calculate, when I will do oscillation probability, I will not have any sensitivity to the Majorana phases. If I want to measure, to have some information on Majorana phases, I will need to go to other experiments. Namely experiments where there is a violation of lepton number in 2 units. That is where the Majorana nature of neutrinos show up. So this we'll discuss on the last session, that for instance, I can look for that in neutrino-less double beta decay experiments. These processes, neutrino-less double beta decay, processes where lepton number is violated by 2 units, then Majorana phases appear there, so I may have some sensitivity to those phases. But forget about that in the case of oscillations. Just sensitivity to the Dirac phases. Okay? And then, lately, just tell you that neutrino oscillations violate flavor lepton number conservation, because if I assign to my system a electron lepton number, muon lepton number, or tau lepton number, for sure, if there is a change of flavor in the neutrino, the leptonic flavor, the leptonic number conservation is not going to be preserved in these oscillations. However, the total lepton number is going to be preserved. So I will change the flavor of the neutrinos, but I still will have a neutrino. Okay, these are general properties for the neutrino oscillations. Any question about that? Okay. Let's proceed. Okay, so then, now, yesterday we saw the number of mixing parameters, the number of phases in general case of n states, and with a mixing matrix of n times n. In this lecture, we are going to focus on the standard model case, that is the three-flavor neutrino picture. Okay, if you remember the number of parameters we derive with this different n as a function of n, mixing angles and phases, and then you put n equal to 3, so you will see that in that case, neutrino mixing could be described by 3 mixing angles, okay, that we denote as θ12, θ23, and θ13, okay? Then there will be 3 CP phases in the mixing matrix, but only one of them will affect neutrino oscillations, because only one of them will be Dirac phase. The other 2 will be Majorana phases, and as I told you, no impact here. We will need to go to other processes in order to get some information. Okay, this is about the mixing matrix. But then we have 3 neutrinos. If we have 3 neutrinos, we have 3 mass eigenstates, so we have 3 masses. So our parameters, in addition to the parameters of the mixing matrix, will be the masses of the neutrinos. But remember, oscillations are not sensitive to the masses, only to the differences. So the sensitivity will be to 2 mass splittings, delta M to 1 and delta M 3, 1. I think I discussed this yesterday as well. In principle, with 3 masses, you may have 3 differences. But the thing is that we know from experiments that this one is much smaller, like 2 orders of magnitude, than that one. Then at the end, this means that this 3,1 is almost equal to the 3,2. So this is why we just say they are not independent, the three different mass splittings, and we can parameterize essentially with 2 mass splittings. Then I can measure these 2. I can have sensitivity to these 2, and then I have this possibility to, we discussed this yesterday, right? About the possibilities to order the neutrino mass spectrum depending on the values of delta M to 1 and delta M 3, 1. I will get back to this later. The thing is that we know that this one is positive, okay? I think I have it to discuss it later. Yes, we know this is positive. We still don't know the sign of this. So then we have these 2 possibilities to order neutrino masses. Since this is positive, N2 will be always more massive than nu1. Nu2 will be more massive. So this pair, I have it clear, the configuration. But since I don't know the sign of delta M31 square, could be positive or negative, I will have to allow for these 2 possibilities. And usually what we do is that we do our calculations, our simulations in both, assuming that both cases are possible, and then we are trying to see in which case the results are more compatible with data. So far, there are no strong indications, but there is a hint on the solar neutrino oscillations that perhaps the value preferred will be delta M31 square positive, okay? So this is just to fix a little bit the notation I'm going to use. Okay, so then you have there the formula you derived, and we saw also yesterday, the formula for the 3 neutrino oscillation probability. So the parameters that we are going to measure, I just described it. So we have the mixing matrices here, these U, are parameterized in terms of this. These are 3, this is a product of the three rotations. Instead of putting the product of the 3 matrices, I think it's more clear just to put the parameterization with 3 different rotation matrices between the different planes. So there you can see that there are the 3 mixing angles. This C23 stands for cosinus theta 23, and S23 is sinus of theta 23, okay? So then, with this parameterization, we have one mixing angle, theta 23, that, as we will see, is mostly, it will mostly appear in atmospheric and accelerator experiments. Another mixing angle, theta 13, that we will measure in short baseline reactor experiments and accelerators as well. And theta 12, that we measure in solar experiments and long baseline reactors. You can see that there, I already forgotten about the Majorana phases. I'm not including them, but I'm include the Dirac phase. This delta is the Dirac phase. Okay, the sensitivity, these elements I can measure from the oscillation channel nu mu to nu tau in atmospherics plus accelerator experiments. So mostly it will be a disappearance channel because the conservation of energy will not allow for the production of taus. So when I write in atmospheric, I will have this channel. This is true. This is the oscillations are running in this channel, but the energies of the mu neutrinos will not allow for the production of the nu taus. So what I could see at experiments is the probability from nu mu remaining as nu mu, what we call disappearance probability, or so survival probability, okay? So in the case of theta 13 and short baseline reactors and accelerators, we will be sensitive to the two different channels. So in the case of reactors, in reactors, you know, we have electron antineutrinos, okay? And we know they oscillate. And again, it will happen the same. So in principle, they will oscillate to nu mu and nu tau. But the energy of the electron antineutrinos is order MeV. With order MeV, I cannot produce muons or taus. So what I will try to look at the experiments will be also the survival probability of nu E, anti-nu E to anti-nu E. Okay? Then the sensitivity, we will see that sensitivity to the delta CP phase appears in the appearance channel in accelerators. I will have an appearance channel because we will have beams basically mostly composed by muon neutrinos or muon antineutrinos, and they convert to electron neutrinos or electron antineutrinos. And finally, in the case of solar, so I will see oscillations in the channel nu E to nu X, but again, since solar neutrinos have an energy of MeV, I will not be able to see the muons, but I will measure the probability, survival probability from nu E to nu E. So we will see in more details these results. I'm just putting this in order that you can see where comes the sensitivity from. Okay, the sensitivity, for instance, to theta 23, theta 23 is the mixing angle connecting essentially nu mu with nu tau. So this is why to have access to this, I need to measure this channel. Okay, then what about the order of magnitude of the sensitivity of the experiments? In order to do so, to do this estimation, we need to look to the oscillation term in the survival probability. So you see here that in the survival probability, one has this oscillation term going as sinus square delta m square L over 4E. So if I want to have some sensitivity to the parameters here, delta m square, I need to optimize the value of the oscillation phase. This is the oscillation phase. Okay, because if you remember yesterday, we saw the different regimes. There are three regimes. If I am in if the longitude, if the oscillation length is very short, oscillations still didn't have time to develop, so the phase is very small. If the phase is very small, then there will be no oscillation. If the phase, this phase there, is very large, I will be in the regime of very fast oscillations. You remember this plot we saw yesterday. And then since the oscillations are very fast in energy, I will need a very, very good energy resolution in my experiment to be able to distinguish these very fast oscillations. So in the end, you are sensitive only to the average probability. So there will be essentially no sensitivity to delta m square, because the fast oscillations will be like that, and my detector will be this, will see this, just the average. Is this clear? So then the interesting range is when the phase oscillation is around pi over 2, because then you are in the maximum of the oscillation. So usually the man-made experiments are designed in order to get this value, to have the oscillation phase around pi over 2, because in that case, oscillations are maximal and you have better sensitivity to delta m square. Of course, for solar neutrino experiments or atmospheric neutrino experiments where you cannot play with the baseline, you cannot do anything. But once we design experiments, reactor experiments or accelerator experiments, we can play with this, because we can play with the density, with the distance between detector and source, and with the energy of the neutrinos. So the thing is that one will have maximal sensitivity if delta m square L over 4E is around pi over 2. So let's see an example to see how to optimize these values. Okay? So first of all, I don't know if you realize, because yesterday you didn't know it. Christoph, you didn't do any calculation with the phase, right? So this result, this is very nice, this is very compact, but if you need to do calculations, you cannot use this, because here this term is expressed with natural units. So you need to do actual calculations. You need to find out the different H bar C that are hidden there. So the thing you need first to realize that this delta M squared L over 4E that you have there in the oscillating term, in the probability, then if you want to do actual calculations, it would be 1.27 delta M squared expressed in units of electron volt squared, distance expressed in kilometers, and energy expressed in giga electron volts. So this is a very easy exercise just to try to, by dimensional analysis, you might find out the H bar C and then do this calculation. Okay, so then imagine I want to design a reactor experiment in order to test the conversion mechanism in solar neutrinos. Because if you remember yesterday, we discussed that the SNO experiment that had sensitivity to the different flavors was able to say, okay, what is going on is that electron neutrinos are converting to other flavors. But SNO didn't know how this conversion happens, okay? Then if you want to build an experiment on Earth to check if really this solar neutrino problem is explained with oscillations, you can tune your parameters in your reactor experiment to be sensitive to the delta M squared that solar neutrino results points towards. So we know that solar neutrino experiments can be explained with delta M squared around 8 times 10 to the minus 5 electron volt square. So then using this argument there, I can calculate what distance I need to put a detector from a reactor in order to be sensitive to this oscillation with this delta M square. Okay, then, why reactor? Because these solar neutrino experiments are electron neutrinos, okay? The source, the artificial source where I can have a lot of electron neutrinos are reactors, although they are antineutrinos, okay? But okay, we assume CPT conservation, as usual in all the theories, the oscillation channel should be the same between neutrinos and antineutrinos. So for reactors, the energies of the neutrinos are of a few mega electron volts, from 2 to 15 mega electron volts, let's say, something like that. So then you can try to calculate for which values, if you just fix that this should be of the order of pi over 2, you can see for which baseline you can optimize the sensitivity of your reactor experiment to test the solar neutrino anomaly. Okay? Are you following? Then, just putting these numbers over there, you will get that you will need an experiment with a baseline of around 150 kilometers. And this is why the Camland reactor experiment that I will discuss in a while, Camland in Japan was designed. There was a detector that was observing electron neutrinos from more than 50 reactor cores in Japan with an average baseline of 150, 180 kilometers. Okay? So this is for reactor. Now, the same for atmospheric. I want to build an artificial, a man-made neutrinos experiment to check on terrestrial experiments the anomaly of the atmospheric neutrinos. Okay, so we can do the same exercise. In the case of atmospheric, we know that the results point towards a value of delta M squared of 2.52 times 10 to the minus 3 electron volt square. Okay? Then, in that case, atmospheric neutrinos are essentially mu. So then if I want to use an artificial source of mu neutrinos, I have accelerators, beams of neutrinos producing accelerator. So in that case, I can play a little bit with the energy because I can I can accelerate protons to different energies in order to have neutrino beams with a range of energies. So in the case of reactor, we did not have this freedom. It was few MeV. So in that case, I could consider just estimating the optimal value of L over E, because then I will be able to, depending on the baselines, I could use different values for the energy, okay? Then, with the same argument, you can see that you can build accelerator experiments to be sensitive to this delta M squared of atmospheric with L over E of the order of 500 kilometers over GeV, okay? And then you have more possibilities here because you can choose depending on the baseline, you may have beams with different energy. For instance, one of the experiments, one of the leading experiments of accelerator is T2K in Japan. Okay, T2K, they are firing neutrinos from Tokai, where there is accelerator, to the Kamiokande detector, Super Kamiokande detector in Kamioka. And then the distances, so they have already a baseline. They have like an accelerator in one place, an underground lab in another, and the distance is about 300 kilometers. So then they can tune the energy of the neutrino beam to reproduce these numbers. And then in the case of T2K, you have that with energy, with a beam of neutrinos with energy order 0.6 GeV, you'll be sensitive to this delta M, okay? But then you have more freedom. For instance, now there is the new proposal, the new experiment under construction at the US, DUNE. DUNE, in principle, will fire neutrino beams from the Fermilab laboratory in Chicago to the South Dakota SORF underground lab. And then the distance between these two places is of the order of 1,300 kilometers. So then, with this baseline that it is more or less fixed, because the place where you have the underground lab and where you have the accelerator, then you can be sensitive to all these oscillations, just creating a neutrino beam with energies about 2.5 GeV. Okay? Indeed, DUNE is going to be a bit farther because they want to have sensitivity not only to the first maximum, this will be the first maximum, pi over 2, but then they're going to use a wide beam in order to be sensitive to the second maximum, to 3 pi over 2. And then with this energy, they will be sensitive to the first maximum, and with energy around 0.8, they will be sensitive to the second maximum. So then what they will have will be a wide beam with a distribution of energies. So then you can see how the business works. So I have some experiments where I cannot do anything, so all are atmospheric, but in the artificial experiments, I can play a little bit with the parameters to check the challenge I'm interested in. Okay? Is this clear? Okay. So then, here you can see this plot that is very nice. I like it very much because there is like a summary of what I have done here. So there you have the axis, you have the baseline, the distance L, and here you have the neutrino energy. And then these lines are lines that correspond to this value of the maximal sensitivity. So if I want to have, for instance, this line corresponds to maximum sensitivity for delta M in the atmospheric range. So 2 times 10 to the minus 3 electron volt squared. So I have all these values of distance and energy to build experiments. So you can see here that these experiments I was discussing, DUNE, T2K, they are all over this line because they want to maximize the sensitivity to the atmospheric oscillations. I was discussing also CAMLAND. In CAMLAND, is close, you want to explore the sensitivity on delta M to 1, so it is close to this band. Also, we discussed about the other reactor experiment, Juno. And we will get back, because here you see the band to test the solar splitting, the band to test the atmospheric splitting, and then there is these 2 other bands here that I will be back, I don't know if maybe today or on Friday. Because then the idea is to test another delta M squared, that we will see what it is. Okay, so I have discussed the sensitivity to the different mixing elements, to the masses, how to tune, how to design experiments to be sensitive to an order of magnitude to improve, to maximize the sensitivity to delta M, but also I have not discussed the sensitivity to the sign of delta M squared. Before I told you that there are these two possibilities. If you remember, yesterday we were discussing matter effects modifying neutrino oscillations. The idea, the simplistic case is that I'm in matter, so then the mass eigenstates are not the ones in vacuum because they feel an effective potential due to the interaction neutral current and charge current with the particles in the field. So then the mass eigenstate will not be the vacuum ones, will be mass eigenstates in matter. And then the mixing angle connecting flavor states and mass eigenstates will be different. I will switch from the mixing angle in vacuum, this theta, and I will need to calculate the mixing angle in matter. So this will be the modification. Okay, this is the simple case of constant density. Okay, so there the modification depends on this effective potential that neutrinos feel, and the effective potential is essentially depends on this. We can simplify to the Fermi interaction between neutrinos and electrons, and then it depends on Na, that is the number density of electrons in the medium. So the number density of electrons in the medium modifies the mixing angle in vacuum to the mixing angle in matter. Okay? Then, what has to do this with the sign of delta M squared? So look, in the case of solar neutrinos, okay, matter effects have been observed. If you remember, I was discussing yesterday that the neutrino oscillation probability is very strong dependent on matter effects. I think I don't have the plot there. But if you remember this plot, we will see it later. We have this plot with the survival probability, PEE. And then we saw that for the low energy part, there were no matter effects. So essentially the probability was like in vacuum, 1 minus 1 over 2 sinus squared to theta. But here in the larger part of the energy spectrum, matter effects were very strong. And then here the probability was like sinus squared theta. And then the curve was going like that, okay? So then, this means we have seen this because we have points here. There are experiments that have measured this very good. And then we have seen that the neutrino survival probability curve is consistent with matter effects. So we have seen matter effects in the sun. So if we have seen matter effects in the sun, we know this happens. We know that the mixing angle in vacuum is modified to a mixing angle in matter. So this term is affecting there. And more important, this formula has a minus and a plus. The minus is for neutrinos, and the plus is for antineutrinos. Okay? So in the case of solar, what do I have? Solar are neutrinos. So in the case of solar, I will have a minus square root of 2 GF NE. Okay, so then, and I have seen that the matter effects happen. And my term there is delta M squared for E cos 2 theta. And the thing is that when these two terms are equal, I have this resonance. So I know in solar neutrinos, these two terms are equal at some point for some energy. So this means that delta M squared has to be positive. Okay? So I'm with neutrinos, so minus. This happens because I've seen the resonance. Since I've seen the resonance, this goes to 0 at some point. So then this means that delta M squared for solar is positive. So this is what I was telling you before, that we know that nu2 is over nu1. This we know for sure. What happens with atmospheric neutrinos? In atmospheric neutrinos, there will be also matter effects because neutrinos traverse the Earth. However, the matter effects are not that large because the density in the Earth is smaller than the density in the Sun. Also, the term, the oscillation term that control the size of the matter effects is proportional to the smallest mixing angle, theta 1,3. So this makes things harder because then, since theta 1,3 is the smallest mixing angle, it suppresses a little bit the matter effects in atmospheric neutrinos. So this is why it's hard to measure. Then, yeah, why is that? Because the main channel in atmospheric neutrinos is nu mu to nu tau. But nu mu to nu tau, there are no matter effects. Because for the oscillation probability, what is important is a difference of phase between the different states. Because when we calculate the oscillation probability, we just took the phase difference. So in the case of the oscillation channel between nu mu and nu tau, they had the same matter, effects inside the medium material because they only have neutral currents. Neutral currents nu mu, neutral currents nu tau, because in the Earth, in the sun, there are no mu's, there are no taus. So they have nu mu and nu taus the same interactions. Since they have the same interactions, they just have, I can add to their fields a common phase. If you remember in quantum mechanics, a common phase, I can remove it. So then matter effects are not present in nu mu nu tau, but matter effects are present in the nu mu to nu e, because there is a difference. Because for nu mu, there are only interactions via neutral currents, but for nu e, there are interactions with neutral currents and charged current. So then I can remove the common phase coming from the neutral currents, but I still have the common phase that comes from the charged currents. So this channel is sensitive to the matter effects. But as I was telling you, this channel, the probability is proportional to sinus of theta 1,3 that is small, okay? So then it's hard. So the thing is that we still don't know the term. And an important thing to notice is that the same that was happening here. So in atmospheric, for solar neutrinos, it was clear. I had only nu's. For atmospheric, I have nu mu's and nu mu bars. I have both combinations, okay? So then I may have the two effects. So if I consider neutrinos, neutrinos, in that case, I will have a minus here as well in the formula. And then if I observe matter effect with neutrinos, this would mean that, if I see this matter effect, this would mean that delta M atmospheric is positive. However, if I see the effect, the matter effects in antineutrinos, then this would be that delta M square is negative. But still, we didn't have enough sensitivity to measure. This is why still we don't know. Okay? Any question about this? Okay, so then there are also some, I was telling how to design an experiment. Also, one can take different approaches to design an experiment. One can build a disappearance experiment, where it's like solar, like reactor, you have an original flavor in your source, and you, at the detector, you measure the same flavor. This is essentially because you don't have the energy to produce other particles, as in the case of you cannot produce muons, taus, then you will have this appearance experiment. But you can also have appearance experiments. So you start with a beam with a given flavor, and then at the detector, you look for the other flavor of neutrinos, okay? And the important thing is you go to this formula, and then you calculate the Sorolles probability in the channel nu in a disappearance experiment. So you calculate probability for nu alpha, and for nu bar alpha. And in that case, you go to the formula, and they are equal. Even though, despite the presence of phases, they are equal. But if you go to an appearance experiment and you do this calculation there, you will see that if there are phases, in principle, they are not equal, okay? So this is why if we want to measure the Dirac phases in oscillation experiments, I need to go for an appearance channel. With these appearance channels, I will not see any difference between neutrinos and antineutrinos. That is the hint for the presence of phases. So you want to measure phase, so go to an appearance channel, okay? Okay, so this is the formula. So far we have measured those parameters, the mixing angles, as I told you, the value and the sign of the solar splitting, only the absolute value of the atmospheric splitting, and still there are some parameters we don't know. We don't know the sign of the atmospheric splitting. Also, there are some uncertainties around the mixing angle theta 2,3, because it's around 45 degrees, but we don't know if it's a bit above or a bit below. And you can say, okay, does it matter that it is above or below? The point is that for the people doing model building, trying to build models of neutrino masses, it makes a difference having the theta 2,3 maximal above maximal or below maximal. So this is why this is an important thing. And also we don't know still the value of the SCP phase because it is very hard to measure, as I was trying to explain. Then from the data we know that this is around 2 orders of magnitude larger than this other, and the sinus square of θ13 is smaller compared to the other mixing angles. So with this information that we only have after measuring at experiments, I can tell you that even though the correct thing will be doing the full calculation with neutrinos, since these values obey these relationships, one can approximate in some scenarios the 3 neutrino oscillations with the 2 neutrino approach. So the 2 neutrino approach is not that bad for some of the scenarios, and then instead of having this very large formula, you can just at first approximation, use the 2 neutrino oscillations formula. Okay? So just one more slide, and then we stop a little bit. So then here, as I was telling you, one can do the 2 neutrino approximation, okay? That is with this formula. And then in the different sectors, you will be sensitive to mostly 2 parameters because you go to a 2 neutrino formula, 2 parameters, one mixing angle and one mass splitting. So for solar, you will have sensitivity to these 2, for reactor to these 2, and to atmospheric accelerator to this. However, at the end, if you want to do precise measurements, and we are already doing precise measurements, I mean, this could work like a first approximation to have an idea, but you need to go to the 3 neutrino because also the different samples have sensitivity or even though subleading to other parameters. For instance, solar neutrinos are also sensitive to θ13, or atmospheric are sensitive to θ13 and delta M21 or delta CP phase. So at the end, all the samples are connected. So if you want to do precision measurements, combining all the results, you need to go to the 3 neutrino approach. And let me just finish before the break with this slide that's also very nice. It's not mine. You have the reference there. It's done by Peter Denton. So this slide shows the evolution of the measurement of the neutrino parameters since the 88, when oscillations were discovered in Super Kamiokande, until 2020. And then you have atmospheric mixing angle, atmospheric mass splitting, well, the absolute value, solar mixing angle, solar mass splitting, θ13, that is the reactor mixing angle, and delta CP phase. And there you can identify very clearly when one experiment starts having data, starts having results. For instance, in the case of the solar parameters here in red and in green, θ12 and delta M21, you see that there was a big change. This means the allowed range, okay, the allowed range of the parameter. The different colors are the different sigma levels, different confidence levels. So you see that here it was really allowed a very wide region, but then at some point here, around 2008, something like that, suddenly the ranges shrink to a very small uncertainty. And this happened because of the Kamland experiment. Kamland delivered almost the latest results. You remember Kamland was designed specifically to test the solar neutrino solution. It worked very well because it allows us to go from this scenario to a very good determination of the parameters. Also, for instance, θ13. θ13, the reactor angle, for a lot of years, we didn't have a clue of the value. We had just upper bound. It should be smaller than this one. But then around 2011, the reactor experiments, the Sorbidal reactor experiment, started taking data, and they discovered in 2011, 2012, they measured for the first time the value of θ13. So then you can see there. Here is when these experiments, Double-Shaw, Dayabei, and Reno, that we will discuss, appear. Or, for instance, here is a nice thing. For θ23, you may wonder, oh, what happens here? Because they were just decreasing the uncertainty, but then it go back again. And then here, I think what happens is that before 2005, most of the analysis were done in the 2 neutrino approach. And once the experiments realized that they need to do the precise 3 neutrino approach, essentially, they one more parameter, and then the parameter space was larger. So I think this is why, because they changed from 2 neutrino analysis to 3 neutrino. But yeah, I think this is very illustrative of all the effort and all the work that has been done in the last 20 years on this business of the neutrino solution parameter. So let's do a break, and then we Okay, so let's continue. So this first part, I was trying to explain the more in detail, the design of the experiments, the sensitivity to the parameters. So this part is going to be more going into the details of the experiments. So then I will present the results we have so far for neutrino oscillations in all the experiments that where we have observed it. So I will talk about the solar sector with these solar experiments using radiochemical techniques, experiments using water Cherenkov as Super Kamiokande, heavy water as snow, liquid scintillator Borexino, also Camland. I put it in the solar sector because even though it's a reactor experiment, it was designed to test the solar neutrino solution. In the atmospheric sector, I will discuss Super Kamiokande because Super Kamiokande measures solar neutrinos, atmospheric, supernova, many things. Also, we'll discuss the neutrino telescopes that are sensitive to atmospheric oscillations, like IceCube in the South Pole, Antares that already finished in the Mediterranean, and now his new version, Chem3Net, in the Mediterranean as well. For the reactor sector, I will discuss this generation of experiments that allow the discovery of the θ13 mixing angle in 2011, 2012. And for the accelerator, I will discuss some of these experiments designed in order to test the atmospheric neutrino signal. And yeah, I will talk a little bit also about OPERA, happening here in Italy, measuring nu mu to nu tau with appearance events. So really measuring the appearance of the nu tau. Okay, so let's start with the solar sector. So this slide, we have already seen it. Solar neutrinos are produced in the core of the sun. How we simulate the predicted signal at Earth. So we have the standard solar model that predicts the total flux of neutrinos that arrive from the different reactions that take place in the sun. You see, all these reactions are part of the PP cycle in the sun or the CNO cycle, and all of them produce neutrinos. So when we call about the PP neutrinos, are the neutrinos produced in this process here, or the oxygen neutrinos here. And then the standard solar model tells us the flux we can expect from each of the reactions. So the more abundant are the PP neutrinos. You see here the flux, but also the neutrinos with the lower energy. And the standard solar model tells us not only the total flux, so the number of neutrinos we measure at Earth, but the distribution of energies. Because doing these calculations, you can infer the spectrum of the produced neutrinos. So you have here the results. For instance, the PP neutrinos here are the less energetic. In this line here are the boron neutrinos, okay, that are not so abundant, but at the higher energies, in between 5, 10 mega electron volts, are the dominant source. And they are important because then the different experiments that have been used, from the radiochemical techniques to the water Cherenkov and all of that, they have different energy threshold. So then they have access to different part of the solar neutrino spectrum. For instance, the radiochemical, the chlorine, has a threshold about 0.8 mega electron volts. So it is only sensitive to neutrinos from there. So the chlorine experiment is not sensitive to the PP neutrinos. But the gallium, that is also a radiochemical experiment, has a lower threshold, around 0.23 mega electron volts, and then it is sensitive to the PP neutrinos. What about the water Cherenkov detectors? In that case, the energy threshold is much higher. So it used to be 5 mega electron volts. Now, with the latest developments in Super Kamiokande, they managed to lower it up to 3.5 mega electron volts. But you can see here that they are not going to reach these other fluxes. So essentially, they are sensitive to the boron flux neutrinos. Okay, this is just to have in mind what is going on. So these are the predictions. Then we saw yesterday, I was discussing here, we know from the presence of matter effects how the Sourelle probability behaves. So for the lower energies, matter effects are not important. So oscillations happen essentially in vacuum. While for the highest energy part, the boron neutrinos, matter effects are important. The resonance happens here, where this denominator cancels. And then here the probability goes like sinus square of theta. So this is what we know from the theory. Also, this is from the matter effects in the sun, but we discussed also yesterday, matter effects in the Earth are also important because they can induce a difference between the flux of neutrinos that arrive during the night and the flux of neutrinos that arrive during the Earth. So we can establish, we can predict the size of this day-night asymmetry. Actually, it's rather small, of the order of a few percent, but it also gives us a clue on the value of the oscillation parameters that that can reproduce this signal over there. Okay, so with this, with the probability we're sensitive to theta, essentially theta 1, 2, that is the one entering in solar neutrinos, but not to the mass splitting. You see here the probability. This is an approximation. Of course, when we do the calculations, we do the numerical thing, but essentially, delta m squared is not entering there. Because what I was telling you before, the oscillation length of electron neutrinos, okay, is about 150 kilometers. Then the distance from the sun to the Earth is much, much larger. So what is happening is that there are many, many, many oscillations. And then at the end, what we see at Earth is an average of this. So this is why we don't have sensitivity to this term of sinus squared delta m L over 4E. No sensitivity to that. But we don't have the sensitivity essentially from the probability, but here you see this day-night asymmetry takes different values as a function of the mixing angle, but also the mass splitting. So we have sensitivity to the mass splitting, delta m to 1, not through the total rate of neutrinos, but through, for instance, the day-night asymmetry. Also, because we measure the spectrum of neutrinos at the experiments, and this has also sensitivity to delta m squared. But then you can see how the sensitivity comes from. Here, essentially, mixing angle, and here, the mass splitting. Okay? If something is not clear, please stop me. So yesterday I discussed a little bit about this chlorine pioneering experiment. Apart from that, there were real-time solar neutrino detection in Super Kamiokande, for instance, in Japan. This is a water tank with 50,000 tons of water, and then they measure through this process, neutrino electron scattering, they measure solar neutrinos, and so far they have been able to measure the spectrum. So the number of neutrinos as a function of the recoil of the energy of the electrons produced in the process. And also they have measured, since this is a real-time experiment, they know when the neutrinos arrive to the detector, so they are able to measure the seasonal variation of the neutrino flux. Because you know, the orbit of the Earth is not a circle. Okay, there is some eccentricity. Then there are periods of the year where we are closer to the sun, and other periods where we are far from the sun. So then the flux of neutrinos changes. It's larger when we get closer, and it is smaller when we get farther. So then with Super Kamiokande, they have been able to measure this seasonal variation of the neutrino flux over the year. Other experiments that have measured neutrinos are, for instance, the radiochemical I told you using gallium, this already we discussed yesterday, SNO in Canada using heavy water and different techniques, not only elastic scattering, but also charge current and neutral current processes. And for instance, Borexino, that was using liquid scintillator here in Laboratory Gran Sasso, that with also detection technique, neutrino electron scattering. Okay. Okay, sorry. So this is how the evolution of the oscillation parameters. Before I show you, I show you this evolution of all the parameters. Here you can see the evolution of the determination of the solar parameters over the years. So at first we had only the chlorine experiment in the 60s. That experiment was a counting experiment, so there was no lot of sensitivity to the parameters. So analyzing homestake, once we're able to reconstruct an allowed region in the parameter space here in pink, then with gallium, one can have similarly the same region, but since the energy range of the experiment is different, you may find that the allowed region is somehow shifted from the one from homestake. And then with the real-time experiment, Super Kamiokande and SNO, the sensitivity improved a lot. So at the end, I'm showing this because you can see that the development of the field was progressing with the combination of the different experiments. So first we have only one, and then combining the different experiments, one was allowed to determine that the parameters are in this tiny island there. Okay? Good. Okay, but then I was telling you, with solar, we were not able to single out the conversion mechanism. Several possibilities were on the market. This is why the Camland reactor experiment was designed. It was a reactor experiment, and as I told you before, it was designed with the idea of having the reactors over a distance to the detector of around 150, 180 kilometers, because in that way you can maximize the sensitivity to the solar delta M square, okay? So Camland presented the first results in 2002, and they had the first evidence that really the oscillation was going on there. But you see, these results were the first ones. What was the confirmation that something was happening there? The oscillation was there. But then they were improving the results. In 2004, with more precise results, they were able to reproduce the spectral distortion expected according to the oscillation formula. Okay? And finally, in 2008, they observed the full one period of oscillation. Okay, you see very clear the data points and the predictions and the expectation with oscillations, and then this allowed to perform a very high precise determination of the solar mass splitting. That was not possible with solars, because remember, with solar, the sensitivity to delta M to 1 is lost due to the distance, due to the baseline, because the baseline of the oscillation does not coincide with the baseline, with the distance between the sun and the Earth. But thanks to Camland, one could fix that. Okay, so then the idea is that you have seen in the other plot, we were putting together all the solar experiments, so we can also add to our, to improve our picture, the Camland. So in this plot, you have the determination of the parameters, delta 1, 2, and delta M to 1, from solar. So the lines correspond to different solar models with slight differences. Ciao, Ophelia. And here in black, you have the Camland region. So you can see that not only the combination between solar themselves, but also combining with Camland, it allows to determine more precisely, so the final combination is this region here, the solar parameters. And then you can have here the values one can measure from all this data, okay? So we move to the reactor sector. In the reactor sector, we have mainly sensitivity to this theta 1,3 and delta M square 3,1. For the solar baseline experiments, I'm going to discuss with baselines of the order of 1 kilometer. Okay, reactor neutrinos, I discussed it already first day, the production. Neutrinos come from the fission processes that take place in the nuclear reactors. And you can see that with 1 gigawatt reactor, you can produce more than 10 to the 20 antineutrinos per second. So they are really a very powerful source of neutrinos, and this is why they are popular to the experiments, and in the first place, the neutrino was discovered using this source. And what about the detection? The same detection that was used by Reitz and Cowan to discover the neutrino is the inverse beta decay. So the neutrino interacts with a proton in the detector that produces a positron that annihilates with an electron of the target material, producing 2 photons, and then it produces the positron and a neutron, and the neutron, after some time, is captured by some of the nucleus in the detector, and afterwards, a photon is emitted. So the coincidence of these 3 photons is a clear signal that a reactor and an antineutrino interacted in the detector. So reactor neutrinos, in here I will focus on the short baseline with distance of 1 kilometer, like Diabase, okay? Distance are between 0.1 and 1 kilometer, but the variety of reactor experiment is very large, because for instance, we may have Camland, the one I just discussed, with a baseline of 180 kilometers, but there are some other interesting possibilities, like this mini Chandler reactor, that it is a prototype, that is a mobile laboratory, that it is built in order to check the production, the potential production of nuclear weapons at reactors. So then it is a reactor antineutrino detector that goes inside this truck, and then if you put it just next to a reactor power plant, you measuring the flux that goes out from the reactor, you can infer if something illegal is going on inside the reactor. Then you can see that the reactor experiments are many types. But here I will focus on these short baseline reactors, where this is like the scheme of the experiment. So we have the source are several reactor cores from 2 to 6, and then there is usually a near detector in order to measure the flux of neutrinos that leave the reactor before oscillating in order to normalize. Because you see, there are some predictions of the number of reactor antineutrinos emitted, theoretical predictions, but they're very hard to do. There are some uncertainties. So the best thing is just putting a detector very close, and then you can measure what leaves the reactor before there is time to oscillate. Then you put one detector or several to over a distance of 1 kilometer. And then if you want to see what happens between the source and the 1 kilometer, then you need to do the ratio. You do the ratio between what we observe here and what you observe there. And if something was going on, if there was some oscillation, it will show up in this ratio. And then you don't need to rely on the theoretical predictions for the nuclear reactor fluxes. Okay, so this is the scheme. So with distances over 1 kilometer, so if you do the same exercise we did before for the optimization of the sensitivity, you will see that this distance was chosen in order to be sensitive to delta M squared in the range of the atmospheric splitting. So a few 10 to the minus 3 electron volt square. And in that case, oscillations happen in vacuum because the distance is 1 kilometer, so the neutrinos do not cross the Earth, okay? So there were 3 such experiments, in Double Shaw in France, in Daya Bay in China, in Reno in Korea. All of them have already finished taking data. And the idea is similar. In the case of Double Shaw, they had 2 reactors as a source, one near detector to measure the flux, and one far detector. For Daya Bay was the most powerful. They had 6 reactors, 4 near detectors, to measure, located at different positions to measure the flux, and 4 far detectors, larger compared to Double Shaw, 20-ton detectors. In Reno, in Korea, they use 6 reactors as well, but 1 near detector and 1 far detector. So the idea was the same in all the 3 experiments, and all of them saw the oscillation signal. So they could see, just doing the ratio between the measurement at the far detector and the measurement at the near detector, they could see that some neutrinos were disappearing, and were disappearing in agreement with this formula that depends on L over E. That is a signature that they were oscillating due to the mass, with the formula we have derived. Okay, so they disappear, but they disappear with this shape. Okay, so thanks to that, in this two-neutrino approximation, one can infer the values of these parameters. If you measure the survival probability of reactor antineutrinos, you can measure theta 1,3 and the absolute value of delta M 3,1. The absolute value, because remember, if there are no matter effects, here we don't have sensitivity to the sign of delta M 3,1 squared. So then only we can infer the absolute value. Double Shaw here in this plot, done by Christoph, by the way. In this plot, I'm not showing Double Shaw because Double Shaw, even though it was the pioneering experiment, the first that measured theta 1,3, it got a precision not comparable to the other two, so the precision is dominated by Reno, but also by Daya Bay. And you see, with these results, it was possible to measure the sinus square of theta 1,3 with a precision below 3%. That it was the goal of the Daya Bay experiment. So when they started, they had the goal to get a precision below 3%, and they got it. Okay, they did a bit better. So thanks to these experiments, we were able to measure theta 1,3 mixing angle. Now, another reactor experiment, okay? I was discussing about the SOR baseline, but there is another experiment. I don't know if some of you heard about it. If you are not into particles or neutrinos, most probably not. But the Juno reactor experiment is a proposal. I think they were already filling the detector, but still, I don't know if they are taking data, you know, Eligio? Not yet, right? They were still doing the filling. Okay. So it's an experiment that is going to be installed in China. And there, they're not going to use 150 kilometers of CAMLAN. They are not going to use baseline of 1 kilometer, but they're going to use a baseline of 50 kilometers. Why this baseline? With this baseline, they will be sensitive to all these 4 parameters, to the solar parameters, theta 2,1, delta M squared 2,1, but also to theta 1,3 and delta M squared 3,1. So they chose, the idea of choosing this baseline is because in that case, your 3-neutrino formula, you will need to calculate it, then you will have these 2 terms. you will have the survival probability of the neutrinos will have this component, that is a component that depends on the solar mass splitting. Okay, solar mass splitting is the one here, is like a slow oscillation. Okay, but then on top of this slow oscillation, okay, that is the one dominating for Kamlan. Kamlan only has this one term here. But for 50 kilometers, you need to consider this other term that comes from the oscillation probability. And there you can see that on top of this oscillation, due to the different signs of delta M31 squared, okay, you remember we still don't know if it is positive or negative. So depending if it is positive or negative, the probability will be affected because there will be some wiggles. So you will have the oscillation due to the solar splitting. And then on top of that, this term will induce some wiggles. And the wiggles will be a bit displaced if delta M31 is positive or it is negative. I don't know if you can see, the change is very tiny. You see, this is inferred, you see the blue line, the red line, this is inferred by the different signs of theta M31. And indeed, the goal of this, one of the goals of this experiment is to measure the mass ordering. So if delta M31 squared is positive or negative without matter effects. So far, I've discussed the only way, not the only way, but the way I discussed of measuring the mass ordering was matter effects. Here is a new one. Just measuring these wiggles in a vacuum experiment, because this happens essentially in vacuum, neutrinos travel 50 kilometers. In that case, with a vacuum experiment, you may have sensitivity to these wiggles that will tell you if the sign of delta M is positive or negative. You can imagine that in order to be able to disentangle these wiggles, you need to have a very, very good energy resolution in your detector. This is one of the main problems in the experiment. Okay, you need, because if the difference is so tiny and your resolution does not allow you to differentiate, come on, you cannot do anything. So the goal, one of the challenges of the experiment is trying to distinguish these two wiggles, okay? So then Juno will play two games. We'll play not only the game of the mass ordering that we have seen, but we'll also play the game of precision. Because with Juno, it will be able to get very precise values for these oscillation parameters. So nowadays, the oscillations is you have here the uncertainties, so between 4%, 1%, but with Juno, in 6 years of Junos, the collaboration claims that they will be able to improve the sensitivity for 3 of the parameters to the level below 1%. So they will be able to measure the 2 mass splittings and the solar mixing angle with these precisions, below 1%. So in principle, they will be able to measure the mass ordering, the sign of delta M31, but also to improve the sensitivity on these, of these parameters. So here you have a plot of the sensitivity, and then you can see that in 7 years of the experiment, so this is the time years of the measurement, and they will be able to solve the mass ordering with in a 3 sigma level. When we talk about 3 sigma level, we refer to, with a good confidence, it will be able to determine if the mass ordering is normal or inverted. Let's say if the delta M31 is positive or negative, okay? So we switch to the atmospheric sector. In that case, it will be sensitive to all these parameters here. And I have talked already about Super Kamiokande because in 1988 it discovers atmospheric neutrino oscillations. And the point is that this experiment has been taking data almost, there were some interruptions because there were some accidents, but they were taking data since 1996 up to now, okay? And they are observing solar neutrinos, atmospheric, supernova, etc. This is the tank I show you later. And the thing is that here, in the atmospheric neutrino flux, there are nu mu's and nu is, and there is the oscillation. You remember the nu is stay almost unaffected by the oscillation, but the nu mu's disappear. So the thing is that at the detector, it's possible to distinguish the events that are produced by the electron neutrino, that is like a shower, like a fuzzy ring, from the events that are produced from a muon and come from a muon neutrino. This is like a more clear ring. So essentially, in the 2 neutrino approximation, Super Kamiokande has sensitivity to these parameters, theta 23 and delta M32, and then you can see here the allowed region in the parameter space, the determination of the parameters. So you see, it's around this 2.5 10 to the minus 3 electron volts square. And the mixing angle is, okay, around maximal. So this is about Super Kamiokande, but one can measure atmospheric neutrinos with neutrino telescopes as well. For instance, IceCube. So IceCube is very, is very impressive. So maybe most of you know. Here they detect atmospheric neutrinos using a kilometer square of ice as a detector in the South Pole. And here there is like a scheme of the experiment. And lately they have presented their latest results. So far, the sensitivity was on the atmospheric parameters was led by Super Kamiokande. This is the historical experiment. But in a few years, IceCube is getting higher precision than Super Kamiokande. So the latest results are this black line over here to be compared with the Super Kamiokande line here. So the new experiment is betting the historical one with the neutrino telescope. Then another experiment that is measuring atmospheric neutrinos, was Antares in the Mediterranean Sea. So this is again like an image of the detector. They have these strings that were at the Mediterranean. And then they have measured oscillations that are consistent with oscillations in this new mu to nu2 channel. In that case, the results are not so precise, okay, because they are not sensitive to the energies in the most important region of the atmospheric neutrino parameter that gives you sensitivity on the atmospheric mixing angles, but the results are in agreement with all the previous ones in this channel nu mu to nu tau. So this image is like is going to be the new version of the Antares experiment. That is the CAIM3Net observatory. The CAIM3Net will have two underground neutrino telescopes at the Mediterranean. One for high energy neutrinos close to Sicily, ARCA, and the one that is interesting for atmospheric neutrinos is called ORCA, ORCA for atmospheric neutrinos. So this is the scheme of the experiment. So ARCA will be larger. So here they put as a comparison the Eiffel Tower and this thing from Star Wars to have an idea of the size. I don't know how they established the size of this, but okay, I believe them. And you see, they have in ARCA, they have these 2030 digital units that they use here. And these units have, each of them has 18 digital optical modules that are the photomultipliers that detect the light produced by charged particles in the Mediterranean. So the ARCA is larger. You have two parts with these 150 lines. And in the case of ORCA, will be smaller because the idea is that it will be sensitive to lower energies, and in that case, they will use 150 units spread over a radius of 100 meters, okay? So, what can we expect from this IceCube and Juno? So in principle, they will measure atmospheric neutrinos with very high statistics, so then they will be sensitive to matter effects, because they will observe the atmospheric neutrinos with high statistics. And then one of the main goals is also to determine the mass ordering, the sign of delta M squared. So here you can see not only the sensitivity they can offer, but also how combining their results, IceCube and Juno results, with, IceCube and CAIM3Net results with Juno, you can even improve a lot the sensitivity to the parameters. So here there is this graph from an analysis of that combines the new version of IceCube. IceCube is going to be upgraded, adding new lines. So considering the analysis of this upgrade of IceCube together with Juno, one can see that one can get 3 sigma sensitivity to the neutrino mass ordering only with IceCube. With IceCube, it can determine very, very precisely this sensitivity, but if you combine with Juno, then you will get extra confidence level to the extra confirmation to the result. And the same happens with ORCA. In the case of ORCA, here is a plot with the results only with Juno. This red line is Juno alone, okay? And then about the sensitivity to the mass ordering, to the sign of delta M squared, and here, this line, the blue line, is only ORCA, but if you combine the two experiments, then you can also improve significantly your sensitivity to the mass ordering. So they are important by themselves. They can measure the mass ordering in the future, but also this combination we do with current data, of course, can be done and will be done with the future experiments. So the combination of Juno and neutrino telescopes will be very, very positive. So let's go to the last sector, the accelerator sector. In that case, cannot see it very well. Okay, yes. So I'm going to discuss essentially these detectors MINOS, T2K, NOVA, and also OPERA that were measuring oscillations from neutrinos created in an accelerator. In the case of MINOS, NOVA, and T2K, they were studying the signals, we will see later. With a muon neutrino beam, they will measure the survival probability to muon neutrinos, but also the appearance to electron neutrinos, okay? And this will be done with neutrinos and with antineutrinos. In the case of OPERA, I will show you how they found this evidence for this oscillation, okay? Oscillation channel. So, we discuss it later. These accelerator experiments have been designed in order to check the atmospheric neutrino oscillation channel. Because again, in the oscillation experiment, you cannot tune the parameters in order to get extra sensitivity. But in that case, we can. We have seen it before. So if you choose L over E around 500 kilometers over GeV, okay, you may be sensitive to delta M squared 3.1 of a few 10 to the minus 3 electron volt squared. That is exactly around the value that explains atmospheric data. Okay, and also as it was happening with the reactor experiment, that they were combining near detectors with far detector in order to remove part of the uncertainties on the theoretical predictions of the flux, here the experiments do the same. So they, in addition of the far detector that is located to a distance L, that obeys this expression here, they use also a near detector close to the source that evaluates, measures the flux as it leaves from the source before starting the oscillations, okay? So here you have, for instance, MINOS in the US that studies neutrinos produced at Fermilab that travel up to Sudan with a distance of 735 kilometers. T2K, we discussed in Japan, that measures neutrinos with a distance of almost 300 kilometers. Or NOVA in the US, where they use also neutrinos from Fermilab to this Ash River laboratory, where this around 830 kilometers, okay? The results observed in all of them are consistent with atmospheric data, okay? And they are sensitive, as I told you, to this disappearance channel and also to the appearance channel. Why is that important? So if we consider the survival probabilities for the disappearance channels, so it is essentially this formula here in the two neutrino approach. This we have seen it already for atmospheric. We have sensitivity to theta 2,3, this atmospheric missing angle, and to delta M32. Okay, good. But if we open for the electron neutrino and electron antineutrino appearance, so from muon neutrino that converts to nu or anti-nu, and this happens in matter because for reactor, I was talking about distances of 1 kilometer, 50 kilometers, 108 kilometers. Their neutrinos do not cross the crust of the Earth. So then you can consider essentially vacuum oscillations. In the case of these experiments with baseline of 800 kilometers or 700 kilometers, so with 300 there are less, but you have to consider that neutrinos cross part of the Earth, the more superficial part, the crust, and then there will be matter effects, okay? So then when one considers the appearance channel, one has to take into account this thing, that matter effects are present there. And then remember, if there are matter effects, then we have sensitivity to the sign, so I don't know what there is, there is to the sign of the delta M squared. You are sensitive to the sign of this A parameter that enters here, and A essentially depends on the sign of delta M31. So in that case, the appearance channels in accelerator experiments is sensitive to the mass ordering. Okay, but not only to that. Remember, we were discussing about the possibility of having CP violation in experiments. And you remember we saw that according to the formula, in a disappearance channel, there is no sensitivity. The phases do not play a role. But in an appearance channel, there is sensitivity to the delta CP phase. So here with this channel, nu mu to nu e, we have sensitivity to the delta CP phase, okay? Because this is an appearance channel. Through matter effects, we are sensitive to the mass ordering. And also, since there are some terms that are proportional to sinus squared theta 2, 3, okay, to be compared with the parameter that enters in the disappearance. In the disappearance enters sinus squared 2 theta 2, 3. So in that case, we are not sensitive to the octant of the theta 2, 3 mixing angle. We are not sensitive to the difference between angles below 45 or above 45, because sinus squared theta 2, 3 is blind against the octant. But with the appearance channel, we have a term that depends on sinus squared theta 2, 3. This term is not blind to the octant. So then, with this channel, we add extra sensitivity to all these things, to the CP phase, to the mass ordering, and also to the octant of the mixing angle. Okay? So, combining the results of the atmospheric and accelerator experiments, one can derive the allowed regions for these parameters from the individual experiments. So here you have, in the plane of theta 2, 3 and delta M3, 1 square, the regions that are inferred from the different experiments. For instance, Super Kamiokande, Ice Cube Deep Core, you see here in black, T2K, NOVA, and MINOS. And you can calculate the values of the oscillation parameters. Essentially, what you can see from the plot, just looking from far away, you can see that there is an agreement. So all of the experiments report allowed values in the same region. The best sensitivity is obtained by T2K, the blue line, but also is very, very closely followed by NOVA in red and Deep Core. So Deep Core is getting lately very, very precise results. And this is important because Deep Core starts being competitive with long baseline. Well, long baseline were designed specifically to check for the signal. It's not the case of Deep Core, because Deep Core, I mean, you cannot choose the distance to the atmospheric neutrinos. But yeah, it's a very relevant thing that now you have these three experiments competing for the sensitivity. What about the CP phase? I told you that if we include the appearance channels in accelerator experiment, then this nu mu to nu e or anti-nu mu to anti-nu e, then it allows the measurement of delta CP. So this channel appears not only in accelerators, but also in atmospheric experiments. Atmospheric experiments also have this possibility. So then in Super Kamiokande, there is some sensitivity to the delta CP phase. So the data reported by Super Kamiokande allow to say something about the delta CP phase. And in that case, Super Kamiokande observes an excess of electron neutrinos, so an excess in this channel, nu mu to nu e, and this excess is consistent with having the delta CP phase around maximal values, 3 pi over 2. It's still a hint, it is not a measurement. What happens with accelerators? With accelerators, we have here this plot comparing NOVA results, NOVA in color, and T2K with hollow lines, empty lines. And then you see that T2K, so the results are for normal ordering, so for delta M31 positive, and for inverted ordering, delta M31 negative. In both cases, the region of T2K, that is the black line, is around, this is minus pi over 2, that is 3 pi over 2. So T2K, in both cases, prefers the same values as Super Kamiokande, maximal CP violation, 3 pi over 2. While in the case of NOVA, the result is not that clear, because it depends on the ordering. You see that NOVA, here, for instance, it seems it shows a preference for values here, and in the inverted ordering there. So it is still not clear what's going on. There is a bit of a tension between the results of T2K and NOVA. So then for sure, we will need to go to the next generation of experiments in order to clarify this topic. Just let me very quickly talk about the OPERA experiment. The OPERA experiment was happening here in Laboratory de Gran Sasso. The baseline was from CERN to Gran Sasso, about 700 kilometers, and they were firing muon neutrinos from CERN up to the underground lab in Gran Sasso. Then the goal of this experiment was the search for oscillations of nu mu, but in the appearance channel, because so far atmospheric accelerator are looking for muon neutrino oscillations, but to the disappearance channels, because tau neutrinos cannot be produced. But in that case, the beam of muon neutrinos had an energy of 17 GeV, with this 17 GeV, you can produce the taus, and then you can detect it. So the main channel was nu mu to nu tau, but there was also a subdominant contribution from nu mu to nu e. So in that case, the probability for disappearance channel was has this expression with theta 2,3 and delta m 2,3. So then the opera was sensitive to that. However, the sensitivity, the total statistic was not very large because it was very hard to measure the tau neutrinos, and indeed, only 10 events, or around 10 events of nu tau were directly detected in opera. But still, even though the results, they could not infer good precision measurements of the oscillation parameters, but what they observed was in agreement with the predictions of the results. Okay? So this is, I will skip this, is how we combine all the experiments together. And let me just say a few words about the next generation of experiments, because I was discussing that, for instance, for the CP violation, we will not be able to measure with experiments we have so far, because maybe combining the telescopes with Juno, we will get some results, but in order to get a precise determination, we will need to go for this next generation. So one of these experiments will be DUNE. I was discussing before how it was designed in order to maximize the sensitivity. DUNE is going to be an experiment that will send neutrinos from Fermilab to this Sanford underground research facility in South Dakota, and then over a baseline of 1,300 kilometers. It will use, I don't know if it is clear, it was supposed to use 4 FAR detectors. Now it is not clear. It will start with 2. Let's see. But the idea was to use 4 FAR detectors made of liquid argon in the SARF lab. And then, as I was explaining before, they will not focus only on the first oscillation maximum, but allowing for a wide beam with a wide energy range. They will be possible to measure the second oscillation maximum as well. Okay, and then it will get a great sensitivity to mass ordering because the neutrinos will travel 1,300 kilometers. So then they will for sure travel quite a lot inside the Earth, and then this will affect the probability, and then it could be observed at the results. Now, the other proposal is hyper-Kamiokande. That is, you see, we started with Kamiokande, super-Kamiokande, now hyper-Kamiokande. So the experiment is going bigger and bigger. So it will be, again, a Water-Cherenkov experiment. And in that case, it will have great sensitivity to delta CP. So the sensitivity to the mass ordering will not be that large compared to DUNE, because here the distance will be around 300 kilometers, as in the case of T2K. With 300 kilometers, the matter effects accumulated are not that large as in the case of DUNE. And then this is what defines the sensitivity to the mass ordering. However, the sensitivity to the delta CP phase will be larger, okay? So then from this experiment, from DUNE, for instance, there are some plots of the sensitivity. So then in this analysis, the DUNE collaboration shows that for some of the parameters, one may have a determination of the mass ordering in 1 year at a level above the 5 sigma level. So a discovery of the mass ordering in only 1 year of the experiment, okay? While for the sensitivity of the CP phase, it will be slower, it will be not that great. About 3 sigma sensitivity one can expect in 3.5 years, okay? This is the best case scenario. This is if all the parameters turn out to be in the particular region. If the parameters are not that favorable, then in that case, one may achieve the 5 sigma mass ordering, so the discovery of the mass ordering in 3 years. This about DUNE. And for Hyper-K, there are similar plots where you can see that in that case, the sensitivity to the mass ordering will be above 5 sigma, but they will need 10 years, okay? And the sensitivity to the CP phase, it will be larger. So I'm not going to enter into it. It's too technical to enter into the details. But here it's just to give you the message that these measurements that we still don't know, the mass ordering and the CP violation phase, for sure, they will be addressed and they will be determined in this next generation of experiments. And yeah, I finish here. So you have any question, or you want to go for lunch? We are all tired. So, okay.